that we've had between the entire agency and our different departments. Just a few simple housekeeping things. As a general rule, I think naturally the interpreter is pinned. If you want to change to, do they just change to speaker view to see the speaker, Sam?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
You can do that.
So if you change to speaker view, you can actually, no, when I hit speaker view, I'm still seeing Justin.
Because he's pinned.
Because he's pinned, right.
Yeah.
So do I have to unpin him? I wanted to not, no, okay, anyway.
Gallery view.
Gallery view, yes, gallery view is where you can kind of see everybody. We do keep, excuse me, we do mute for most of the town hall, just so we can keep some kind of order to what's going on. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand in the participant section. We'll try to see you if you raise your hand physically. And if not, you can reach out to Sam Sherry via the chat, and she will make sure that you're recognized. If you have a question you don't want to say or speak and want it to be more anonymous, feel free also to send that to Sam. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Measures. I'm president of the company. My partner, Alicia Ruskin, is also on the line. We also have a good majority of our staff online, of your agents who have wanted to take part in this conversation as well. I found in our previous town halls that there seemed to be a gap in the conversation in regards to the clients who were biracial, and felt that yes, there was bias and bigotry and prejudice against them, but that they also felt a little lost in the conversation, or a little lost in the grander scheme of, I'm not Black enough to play Black, I'm not Latin enough to play Latin, I'm not light enough to play white. So we wanted to bring this together. We got a fantastic moderator. Some of you may have seen his talk he did for us on implicit bias. And then we were also able, through great good fortune, to get Erica Jensen with us as well from Calleri Casting in New York, who can kind of give us a little perspective from the other side of the table as well. So I thank you all for coming. I can't tell you how much these warm our heart just to see your faces. It's a terrible reason that we all have to get together, that we've been forced to get together this way, but to see your faces always makes us all so freaking happy. I can't even tell you. We want to be able to be all in one place and be able to hug you all or bump elbows with you all, or some other form of greeting. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Stuart. Stuart Robinson is a former actor, I think still does some voice work. He's an entrepreneur. He is a writer. He is a motivational speaker. He has been my friend, luckily, for 35 years, and that for me is the greatest distinction of all of his traits, that I've had a friend like him for these many years. And these are the discussions that we've been having, are many discussions that Stuart and I have had over those 35 years in relation to Hollywood and its bias and the place of everybody's place in this business. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Stuart, and I will mute myself.
Thank you, Mark. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Hi. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Stuart K Robinson. I do a lot of speaking about bias and race and all kinds of topics. I want to welcome you to this 6th in a series of KMR town halls, the goal of which is to continue this very important and necessary conversation about bias and race and equal opportunity in the entertainment industry. Race. Okay, some of you have heard me say before that I believe that uncomfortable conversations are actually the ones that from which we learn the most if we can enter them with a spirit of openness and willingness to engage in introspection. So I hope we can do that today. Race is a difficult topic from my point of view, in part because it's kind of a synthetic creation. It's this designation that someone created based simply upon physical attributes, including the color of your skin. But scientists, in truth, have said that variations in appearance don't really equate to genetic difference. So race is kind of a crazy concept anyway. We all know it was created by naturalists and philosophers in the 18th century, and that those were not naturally occurring groups. We know that race was more created to establish power and hierarchy, which is a whole lot different from ethnicity. So like if you're in a minority position here in America, even if you have an ethnicity, you're racialized before you even get a chance to establish your ethnic identity. Example, if someone moves here from Africa, where they've been used to being Senegalese or Kenyan or Nigerian, they come to the United States, they're Black, period. That's it. So even when your ethnicity is chosen, race is always kind of lurking in the background. But today, I think the goal is to focus specifically on the related struggles of artists who have been traditionally referred to as biracial. Some of you may proudly wear that title. Some of you may find it a trigger. Some of you may not even think of yourselves that way. And as you can see, it makes no sense anyway, because race is just a trigger and a tricky issue full of assumptions. And some genius decided a while back that if a person has 1% Black blood in their veins, that person is Black. My fascination with that comes from my own heritage. My mother was a medium brown-skinned woman, and my father came from a family of extremely fair-skinned, I would dare say almost white-skinned, straight-haired siblings. And they were then referred to, of course, we all know as mulattoes, which I guess, given the caramel tones of my maternal family, makes me a quadroon, and then there's the octoroon. And although I didn't inherit what they call high yellow skin that my brother and my sister did, in some ways I had to consider myself biracial simply because of my family. But I was never seen as biracial, even though my siblings were. And nonetheless, where I grew up, we were all outcasts in that all white community because of the one drop rule. You got one drop, you're in an inferior group. And so for me as a young person, it was hard to find a community. And I think that's some of what we'll discuss today. You know, I had white friends, but among that group were people who had no problem boasting and proving their superiority to me. And because I had white friends, some of you have dealt with this, my fellow Black students labeled me, they called me the Oreo. Mm-hmm. Black on the outside, white on the inside. Ha ha ha. So I could only imagine the difficulties that my siblings had, being not Black enough to be accepted into the Black crowd and not near white enough to be anything but inferior. And then years later, I entered the entertainment industry where race was a bigger issue than ever. And for me, and I'll stop talking soon, the teachable moment was in an acting class, a very highly regarded acting class, where I had worked for a week on a monologue from Hamlet, which I performed in the class, only to be told by this legendary teacher, "Why are you doing Hamlet? You're never going to play Hamlet. I mean, a piece from Othello I could see, but you really should be focusing on pieces from Raisin in the Sun and shows like that." And then she dismissed me. Next. And I thought, wow, just because of the color of my skin, my artistic future is somewhat determined. little did I know at that moment, I could look forward and think how this would impact my daughter, my actress daughter, whose mother is white and Jewish, whose father is me, and how she would be confronted by not being white enough for the white roles and not being black enough for the black roles. Some of you not Asian enough for the Asian roles, or not stereotypically Latin enough to play other roles, etc. And it's a unique facet of this racial discussion. We can't lump everybody in. So I think the goal today is to promote some education, because not having walked in any of your shoes, whatever your background is, the only way I can learn, and the only way the KMR team can learn what problems you're facing and how they as a team can best mitigate those problems on your behalf, the better for all of us. So I'm going to, I know this is a family affair, I'm going to open this conversation and get you to a point where I can turn it over to you. That sounds really noble, but actually I have another Zoom I have to do right after this. But my goal anyway is to start and facilitate a conversation among you. And I think that conversation doesn't want to be gripe sessions. I know you all have stories, we all do. But I think more importantly, I think you can, this is a teachable moment. There are triggers that I don't know they're triggers for you, so I say them or do them. There are behaviors, there are microaggressions, there are things that you go through or you witness people go through or you want to avoid stumbling into that of which all of us are unaware. And in my world, the more we have conversation about those things and the more we embrace that uncomfortable conversation, the easier it's going to be for us to grow together and progress together. So I want to introduce Erica Jensen. I'm not going to do a long bio of her. She's a major casting director, award-winning casting director, one of the trio of Calleri casting. She's cast off-Broadway, Broadway, regional theater, and all kinds of stuff. And I just want to welcome you, Erica, to the conversation, and I'll turn that off. Hey, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good.
Yeah.
That was a great introduction, Stuart, and I related so much to so much of your growing up. I wish I'd known you when I was growing up. Yeah, so I'm one of 3 casting directors at Calleri Casting. I've been a casting director in New York City for 20-something years now. I will also give you a little bit of my background growing up. My father was white. He passed away in 2011. My mother is Black, and not only is she Black, but she is Afro-Cuban. So her last name is Rodriguez. So I have a lot going on. I grew up in an all-white suburb. My father got a job in Chicago, so we relocated to a suburb of Chicago. So that's where I grew up. All my friends were white. There were no interracial families. You know, we were the only. So I grew up with that, constantly having to explain my background and constantly having to talk about, like, people constantly asking me, what are you?
What are you anyway? Yeah.
What are you anyway? Where do you come? You know, where are you from? Are you American?
Are you from Earth?
Yeah. And so there are a lot of, like, identity. It wasn't confusing for me. What I realized early on was that it was really confusing for everyone else. And so I was just growing up with my family. That's just how it was. But for everybody else, it was odd and hard to place. And then I became an actor I went to graduate school to be an actor. And my graduate school experience was actually a little bit different. I was the only person of color in my class. But I wasn't, I was cast mostly in, because when you're in graduate school, they tend to sort of cast you where they feel you're, so I wasn't denied any roles based on how I looked or my skin color. It was, I was cast. I got to play a variety of things in graduate school.
In school, they do that. They make you think
Yeah.
that that's going to be easy. Oh, I'm going to get to play Hamlet all day long.
That's right. They make you think they have, you're in this bubble and, it's your education. So it's a different thing. And then when you enter the professional world, you're back to realizing that, even in New York City, which which for me at least was a much less, I don't know how to say it other than sort of a little bit sort of blunt. And I don't want to offend anybody from Chicago, but my experience in Chicago was very, it's a really segregated city. I'm not saying that New York is not. New York structurally is also pretty segregated. However, it was the first time I was in a city where I felt like I kind of blended in for a change, where I looked like a lot of the other people that I saw in the city. However, my acting career didn't last very long, and that had nothing to do with anything other than making a decision to become a casting director because I fell in love with casting. But I will also tell you that I was, when I started in casting, there were no other Black people or any people of color as casting directors. I would go to the casting meetings with our community and I would see that I was the only person in the room who had any kind of color in his skin. And so that was pretty challenging for a long time to be the only person of color and realize that I was the only person of color for many years in our community. And so, so I've watched the industry go through a lot of changes. I've watched us talk first about colorblind casting, which never ever sat right with me. That is that's when you just completely deny who somebody is. You slot people in. There were talks about slotting people of color in without regard to like that person as a Black person, as an Asian person, as a Latinx person. It was just, we're just going to put these people in because we need to, and because it makes us feel good. And so I watched that conversation happen, and then things have evolved, and now we're in a bit of a different place than we were. I will tell you, as a person, as a mixed race person, I tend I like to hold on to being mixed race because I appreciate who my father was, and I don't want to ever deny that. I also, but I will also say that if this makes sense, and maybe to some of you it will make sense, I tend to lean more toward my Black identity because I'm very, very attached to that. That's mostly my big influences, my mother, my grandmother, and her family. So, but I don't like to deny, and I don't think I should have to, and I don't think any of you should have to either, particularly when it comes to casting. I don't think that should be something that you have to deny or pretend not to be, or ever feel like you have to, what's the word? Suppress in order to impress a casting director or your whoever's representing you. I feel like you should be who you are. And we should all be able to be who we are. And I really do believe that this movement we're in right now is allowing for that. So I think there are going to be really big changes that we see once the world opens up again. I'm already seeing big changes. So I'm feeling really optimistic about where we are in terms of casting and how we're all engaging in this conversation. I've never seen the casting community this engaged in this particular movement, issues around BIPOC actors as I have ever in my 21 years of doing this. So, so that's me.
That's great. That's a great one. It's interesting. I was listening to you talk, and my situation was different because my parents and my siblings were so light-skinned. I
Yeah.
grew up my first years thinking I was the only person in the world with this affliction.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later that I went, oh, there are a lot of other people like me. So
Yeah.
that finding the identity thing is interesting. I'm gonna kick this off and then let everybody join in the conversation. How far do you think we are? And this is a really idealistic question.
Yeah.
How far do you think we are from the point, or at least having the discussion about the point of removing race from breakdowns? In other words, now what we see is she's 27 and she's a nurse and she's fun and quirky. She's 28 and she's black and she's this. At what point do you think we'll ever be able to get to the point where we can have that discussion to say, let us just submit our most talented people, our quirkiest people for the quirky role, and then we can figure out later whether what color their skin is, what ethnicity they have, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like we are in a place that's somewhat in the middle. And I think what's happening right now is a push to be really specific on breakdowns about in order to be able to tell stories that involve people of color. Because when you have, like you were saying, Stuart, if you the times in my experience when I have listed breakdowns where the quirky nurse, 29-year-old nurse, if I list that on my breakdown, the only submissions I get are white. So there has been more talk. I was just on a panel recently. The BIPOC Casting Alliance hosted a panel where one of the casting directors who works at ABC, she was saying that she thinks it's really important that we identify and be more specific on breakdowns, at least right now while we're in this movement, because in order to recognize people as people, and not deny that when you're playing a part and you are Black, when you are Asian, when you are mixed race, that's who that character is. And we're not denying, we're not just throwing people in just to fill a quota. And that specificity helps us better tell stories and helps us better see ourselves represented in film and TV and in theater. So I think that while I would love to get to that point where we can throw out breakdowns and not necessarily have to identify race and know that everybody can, that agents and managers and casting directors are all going to be open, and our directors and our producers are all going to be open. We're still not at that point. We're having the conversations. I think like you introduced earlier, we're having the really tough conversations, but we're not like I don't think we're at a place yet where we're there.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I understand Joe Hernandez-Kolsky has a question. So let's see if we can open Joe's mic or a comment.
You opened my microphone.
You're
First of all, thanks again. Thanks again so much for doing this to KMR. I really been really happy about these conversations. So as somebody who is one of the numerous Polish Mexican actors in Los Angeles, I chose to embrace both sides of my heritage as a child. It was something very important to my mother, and it's something I take great pride in. One of the things that I continue to struggle with in my own head, and it's this balance of getting rid of the thoughts that are not helpful, but also being aware of the realities of the industry. And I'm interested in knowing not only your thoughts, but the other actors here. How do you deal with the idea that, like, I feel sometimes still, if you fit a very specific niche, you can still do very well in this business. I have an actor friend who's made a living as a gangbanger. I know another actor who's made a living as an undocumented immigrant, even though he's lived in Los Angeles and his family's lived here for many generations. How do we now start to deal with that, and also go, you're crazy, that's just keep being yourself? But that's I feel that's a struggle for a lot of us with mixed
Yeah.
background. I've been told on both sides. If you get rid of the Kolsky, you'll do much better. And I've also been told on the other side, if you get rid of the Hernandez and get rid of the Kolsky and just go by like Joe Edwin, you'll do much better. Like, where do we go from here now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I've been struggling with where I land on the I tend to lean more toward optimism than pessimism. I'm trying to be more of a realist, like just kind of in the middle. But I do really think that we are having the conversations that I'm having are really much more about like embracing actors' full identities. So I'm feeling a little bit more confident that you should be able to keep both your last names, and that it's up to us to see you as a full person, uh, and as a talented actor. And where can we place you? I know for myself, I'm a little, I like you, I tend to be a little exhausted by trying to figure that part out, because and this is going to sound a little, I don't know what the word is, maybe like airy fairy, but like, I really just want to cast the best people, honestly. Like, I really just want the best actors in my audition spaces, in front of my teams. I want to be creative. I want to show them different people, and how this person can tell this story. And I know a lot of casting directors operate the same way. So I don't want to tell you to get rid of one of your last names. I really don't. Like, I just don't. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't know how everybody else feels. I would love to hear like other people's experiences. I know it's not just you. I've heard it before. I've had other actors ask me if they should, I have a good friend who's been struggling in this business for such a long time. She finally changed her last name to Vega because she thought it would help her better identify, like it would help casting people help identify her a little bit better in terms of her race and ethnicity. I don't know that she's seen big results from that. Honestly, I don't know that that's made a big difference, but I know that was something she was struggling with. And I know that other people struggle with that as well. So I would love to hear what other people, how other actors have dealt with that and what their experience has been.
I know what we did for a while. This is, I guess, 10 years ago. I would actually have my clients put up 2 profiles. And I would do one with a Latin name and I would do one with an Anglo name or whatever it might be. And depending on what I was submitting on, if you weren't getting the time as a Caucasian because your last name was Hernandez, I would submit the Kolsky picture. If you were getting a time in the Latin area because of the Kolsky, I submit the Hernandez picture. So that's, that was me doing a workaround that now in retrospect was wrong and detrimental to the bigger conversation. But that's for a while what we would do to try to game the system, so to speak.
Yeah, and let's keep going on the bigger conversation. I know Marcy has a comment. Can we open her mic? Testing 1, 2, 3.
Unmute. Did that work?
You're on.
Hi, Stuart. Hi, everybody. This is fantastic. Yeah, I had a thought on that. Well, firstly, Mark, it could be detrimental, but it's also back then, I think, probably your actors appreciated that you were doing what you could to get them seen for a role that they normally wouldn't get seen for. I know there's two sides to that coin, but I had a thought on last names and sharing race in terms of when you're walking into a room and when you're being asked to walk into a room. I know I took my husband's name, Harold, and left Danetza to the side because it's an Italian last name and nobody sees Italian when they look at me. No one, and I'm sure a lot of people here in this room today feel the same way. No one knows what to think when they look at a lot of us. People ask, you know, where are you from? And you want to say Earth. But when casting directors, I wanted to share a story. There have been casting directors who have hounded my representation about what I am. And this speaks to putting color in breakdowns, and that being the first and most important thing after the character name is what race this character is. And I don't know if a lot of people here have this, but I don't fully know what I am. And I don't fully know what I am because the makeup of our country in a very short and recent history didn't treat interracial marriages very well. My grandparents, their union was illegal. And so we grew up thinking that my Nana was Black. She was lighter than me, and I would be Stuart, what you would call high yellow in the Black community. My grandmother was white, but she was Black. There was no question about it. We didn't find out until after her death that she was Irish because they had to hide that fact. My family, my mother was, their cars were shot at when they were driving around when she was a child. So there's something to be said for noting what a person is, but I think there's also something to be said for removing that and not saying that we want to share stories of people of color, but recognizing that all stories are stories that include people of color. It doesn't, I know we need to make a push to make that happen and maybe deciding we need to engage people of color and make those breakdowns even clearer is how we need to push through that. But I just wanted to share that sometimes it's hard for a mixed race individual to know what they are or to fully share what they are because they might not know it themselves.
Yeah.
23andMe notwithstanding.
You make a great point. And, you know, it's worth mentioning that it was as recent as 1967 when interracial marriage was against the law in this country.
That was yesterday. That was
yesterday.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and obviously the bigger fight, what we hope someday to achieve is to remove the default. That when you say doctor, the default that you picture even, and I know I picture a doctor, oh, it's this white man. Right. When we can remove the default from all designations, because you all know I have a little connection to Hamilton. Hamilton has proven to us that an audience is willing to accept me as Thomas Jefferson. They're willing to accept it. So that's a start. I know we have a question from Kumiko. Let's see if that mic opens up. And I may not have pronounced that correctly. Forgive me.
Trying to find her. Can you read? Oh, I found you. Okay, I'm meeting you now.
Are you there?
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Oh,
No.
Hi.
thanks for having me. Hi, Erica.
Hey, it's good to see you.
You too. Enjoying this. This is a topic, as everyone here is near and dear to my heart, and it's given me a lot of.
You sounded a little.
My sound is funny.
Yeah, sounds a little funny. So I'll be the second interpreter. She said this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm the sound interpreter.
Hold on.
Try that because it's just crunchy, so it's hard to figure it out. Keep testing. Keep talking while you do it.
So.
Oh, now you're frozen. I think it might partly be your connection. Oh,
Maybe we could jump to Sarah and then come back to Kimiko.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. Sorry. See if you can find a spot where you have a better connection. Sam, you want to open up Sarah in the meantime, and we won't forget you.
Hi, KMR and everyone. Thanks for being here. Erica and Stuart, thank you so much. I just want to say it's really nice to see a bunch of mixed race faces in a room together. I'm like, oh my God, I'm loving this. So thank you so much for creating the space and the time, everybody. I think it's an interesting time to be in right now. I think listening to you, Erica, about what you were saying about, casting is now really focused on getting really specific roles. And I think that what I hate to use the word fear, but the fear that instills in someone like me is that once upon a time, as an actor, we want to get hired to play a bunch of different kind of people. And now, unless the breakdown is for a Black Jewish woman, I'm like, where do I fall? I mean, so it's a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around. Do I submit myself for a role that ethnically I could pass for? Like, do I ask my agents to submit me for a Haitian role because I speak French and I know a little Creole, you know what I mean? Like, and I can do it, but what they're asking for in the breakdown is like, we are looking for people of real Haitian descent. And it feels like what's happening from my perspective is that it feels like I hardly ever see the breakdown that's like, we are looking for a mixed race woman of these two ethnicities. And it feels like the options are dwindling down unless I magically get Black, White, and Jewish by Rebecca Walker greenlit as a movie. It's like, I'm wondering from the casting perspective if that is, and I know you said, you want the best actor for the role, but is it inappropriate in this time to be asking our agents, not pushing, excuse me, agents on the screen, but asking them to submit us for, listen, I can pass for this, or like, can you please submit me here? I feel like I can do this character justice. As a casting director on your side, doesn't make you go like, well, is she really Haitian? Or she's clearly mixed. Maybe she's half Haitian and she's not the other, you know what I mean? Or whatever. I don't know if any of the other mixed race actors out there are going like, where does that leave me if I'm not full this thing? Or
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it depends. When I get that specific, it's typically because the team that I'm working with, I just went through that experience actually with Haitian. The writer was Haitian, and he was writing a sort of semi-autobiographical play about his growing up, and he really wanted the focus to be, if possible, to find two Haitian actors. We weren't able to necessarily achieve that. So I did, I expanded the search. And what we ended up doing is making sure that the actors could do Haitian accents. So that's, I think that's probably what my answer is. I think that when we're working with a team, for example, when I'm working with a team that is, I was working on a play, The Great Leap, and the characters in that play are Chinese. It was not the director really wanted Chinese actors. So I listed on my breakdown that I wanted to see Chinese actors. Now, one of the things that I am not comfortable, and also I believe there are laws against this, I'm also not allowed to ask people. So when I was putting my session together, I had to do, some research on to try to make sure that I was bringing in Chinese actors for this play. And so, so my point is that there's a team around those kinds of decisions. I think that if you see something that you feel you can play, I think that maybe what happens is maybe your agent can call and find out the specifics. If like, okay, you've listed this, are you able to find this, and are you open to seeing people who can be this, and find out, just get more specifics from the casting director and like what their team's expectations actually are. You know, I don't know. I guess I don't see. I think that I understand why you feel maybe limited. I don't know that you. I don't know that you need to wait for you don't need to wait for the breakdown that says Black and Jewish. You do not need to do that. That's not, you know, if you feel if you play Black, that's then great. It can say Black, and that's fine. You know, if it's specific, like you said, if it's Haitian, then maybe the team is looking for very specific like Haitian actors. But if it says Black, you know, I think that's something that you should, that's open to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it just gets you know, I think that it gets hard sometimes when most of the roles I feel like I've gone out for actually some Black roles, but mostly it's like ethnically ambiguous, yeah, or like no race on the breakdown at all, which means like it could be anything, yeah. You know, throw me in a pool with a whole bunch of people who look, you know,
yeah,
listen,
you know,
listen, it is hard. It's a problem. It's not just hard. It's not just difficult. It's a problem that we continue to work on, from my point of view. And we just hope that the day is getting closer and closer where that stops being an issue. Where if you're Haitian, we get to submit you, and you go in and do your stuff, and then they can decide whether you fit the role. But right, it is a problem for casting directors and a problem for agents. I'm gonna try to get, gonna go back in the.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I do.
Okay, yay.
Hey.
Hi everyone. Yes, so this actually kind of in line with Sarah's last comment. As obviously this gives me a lot of anxiety because I am very multi-ethnic. I know one of the things is we talk a lot about biracial, but I am very multi-ethnic. My mother is Creole from Louisiana, and so just talking about it's Black, white, indigenous, and my father's Japanese. I don't particularly look strongly towards any of those except for Native. So when I get concerned, because when I do go sometimes in for Japanese things, because I also speak Japanese, but I don't look, and I'm especially not a lot of times, even I think when they say, even again, mixed, they're like Asian and white. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily read that either. So this gets very challenging for me, because then I think, well, the things I could pass for a lot of other things, but a lot of stuff that I am obviously not. And then I don't want to step on the toes of people who obviously, I feel like anywhere in the like brownish range of like Latino, Middle Eastern, Native, the parts are pretty sparse. And so I don't want to, you know, take from that, but I do get anxiety. I'm like, well, I could go out for this Filipino role because I could pass for Filipino, but like, and I grew up around a lot of Filipinos. I was tinicling around, but I also don't want to, you know, I want them to have their voice and their representation too. So I get so like, will I be chastised if I read for a Dominican role one time? And I was like, but what if I get it and I'll be like, oh gosh, I'm gonna get so much heat from this, but I can't. I get so stressed out every time I see a breakdown and it's specific and even if it's my own, I'm like, oh, forget this. I'm not 100%. And they're going to go with the person who they're going to go with the Chinese girl. Yeah. 100% Chinese before they go with the Japanese mix. Like, I feel like, so even if it's for a Japanese role, so I get very stressed. So I just don't, yeah, I don't know how, like, for especially for the other actors who are of that ethnicity, how do you feel about if you do hear about somebody, say, who passes for Dominican, right? But they're not ethnically Dominican at all, or anywhere in that mix of Dominican. They just they're from Iran and they happen to look like they could pass for Dominican. How do you feel about that?
I feel conflicted, honestly. I will be perfectly honest. I feel conflicted for the reasons that you're saying. The same reasons that you feel conflicted and feel anxious are the same reasons I do, because I want those people to also have their voice. You know, I want those people to see themselves and be represented. And I understand the complications of looking like you could be a lot of things, you know. I'm always, you know, I feel bad that I don't speak Spanish, because the number of people who walk up to me on a New York City street and start Spanish to me, you know, I feel like, you know, I mean, I'm part Cuban, but I don't speak Spanish, so they're not wrong. But
right.
But as a casting director, I will say that I also feel your pain, and I feel I don't have an answer, because I feel conflicted as well. And I feel like, you know, there should be space for roles that are written for, or you know, can be represented by people who are of mixed race. And I think when I have the opportunity, I know in my office, especially when we have the opportunity, I'm not really, when I have the opportunity to you know, to broaden my net of people I'm bringing in, then I do. And I do. And again, you know, I'm feeling more optimistic about that happening, and that we're moving toward, again, not at a pace that I would like, going back to what Stuart was saying earlier, but just, I do think that we are having those conversations and moving toward a place where we're trying to work with, like, equity and SAG to be able to broaden what we put on a breakdown, and like who we see, and talking to our teams about like who we see for projects, and at the same time wanting to respect the specificity and the representation that, like, you know, that you know, some of these storytellers, playwrights want to tell, or TV, you know, or TV shows. So, you know, I'm you know, again, I'm optimistic for a more inclusive, something that will be more inclusive, but I will also just admit that I don't have all the answers, and I feel just as confused sometimes as you do, and frustrated. So
yeah, and my answer is going to be less optimistic as we open Tina's mic. All of us as people of color by now have gotten used to taking heat. So you're going to go for what you go for, and you're going to expect, and you're going to withstand that heat. We didn't create the heat, but we certainly have to be the answer to it. And I empathize with all of the things you're feeling, but and we know it's hard. We're going to win anyway. That's all I can say. You know, we're going to open your mic.
Thank you.
Tina? Did you say Kini?
Yes, I said you.
Oh yeah, you got my name right. Thank you. My question is more getting better with the narrative. For me, I don't want to apologize for being an artist. I don't want to apologize for playing a role that doesn't represent my nationality, because I come from a multicultural family, and I think that's the beauty of being an artist. So my thing is, and Jabari knows because we've worked together, I can't, to give you some backstory, I can't say that I've totally been discriminated, whether it be ageism or colorism, but it's because of, in my younger years, I had a better way of navigating the language between agent and client, or agent and casting director. So when I went out for beginners, true story, the whole room was covered in white women that were models. They looked at me like, this is a joke. I went in the casting office. She was like, this is your role. This is my role. You mean the one with all the white people outside? She said, yeah. I booked it and it was my role. So my thing is, now I'm juggling another team, my squad, and I want to know for the agents as well as for casting directors. Sorry, it's just, you might hear like the bings of the texting, but I have to keep it on mute. How does one navigate language with agents as well as casting directors, where in some roles it's mandatory, it is for a Black person or is for an Afro-Latina person, which I am. And in other roles that's not really, you know, mandatory. When I did the season finale of House, that was another one where it was like a crab, like everyone went in it. But I brought some things to the table, I believe, based on my experiences that changed the narrative. And I feel like that's my challenge right now. It's there is this invisible wall between casting and talent. And sometimes between agents, if you have a manager, which I mean, if you know me, I'm pretty to the point. So I usually don't have that problem, but I would be lying to say I'm not struggling with it right now. So I guess I want to leave the floor open for agents as well as casting directors. How do we, because the reality of it is when you pitch me, your narrative is different than when I pitch me. So how do we develop a union where we're creating a narrative where opportunities are being made before it's greenlit through someone else to say, oh yeah, you know what, we're going to go open ethnicity. Like, we have the breakdown, we have the size. Let me put myself on tape. If you're like, yeah, it works, fantastic. If you're like, no, well, at least we tried. But I think the power is always within us and we have to change the narrative. And then everything else kind of trickles down. So that's my question.
Oh, I feel like you answered your question. yeah. I think you're right. I think that's right. And I think just going off of what Stuart just said, I do think you have more power than you think. You know, I think you have more power than you realize. You should.
But my thing is narrative. Like, how do we find? It's kind of like a construction worker talking to someone who's serving coffee. We're both humans, so we're both operating in a everyday, you get up in the morning, you go to work and you do it. But there is a different language that agents talk versus talent talks. And I just want to know, and casting directors talk in terms of how I can navigate or dissect something where it resonates different from you. I'm not telling you what to do because I don't know how to do your job. Same way you don't know how to do my job. But where we can like come to I hate to use the word kumbaya, but kumbaya moment to like make it happen where I'm allowed to not let anyone put mud on my wings and I can fly, but like you're helping me. It takes a village to make it happen. So I want to perfect my language with my village, I guess.
I can speak to that from the agency side because I've been in discussions with Jed and with Jabari and a lot of the KMR team. And I know that they're already broaching those conversations. They're already it's learning, I believe, I think it's fair to say learning to speak that language on your behalf and open those conversations. I don't think it's solved. And I think you're right that like I said, there needs to be a new default and a new narrative. And I think you're asking the right questions to open it up. But I think all of you are pretty fortunate that you're with a team that wants to have that discussion and wants to learn the right language to approach Erica and say, listen, I'm submitting someone to you who doesn't particularly match the physical description you've done, but she matches the characteristics that you've talked about. And Jed, if you want to jump in on that, I welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, like, I really want to. I want to do the right thing. You know, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But our primary job is to create.
Jed, we let everyone know who you are.
Oh,
So
hi.
we have everybody from different departments. So
Sorry, I'm Jed Abrahams. I run the New York office. You know, our main job is to generate opportunities. And so we're always looking for every angle that we can to generate that opportunity. But now we're finding ourselves kind of in a collision course with wanting to generate opportunities, but do the right thing and be on the right side of the conversation. And I'm thinking right now about a former client who was half Black and half white, but at some point during the journey, the manager told me that their grandmother was Latino. And all of a sudden the narrative evolved that he was Latino. And all of a sudden he started going out for lots of Latino roles. And till this day, I'm not really sure if he was Latino. And I don't know if I had done anything wrong. I just know it was my job to generate opportunities. I was told I wasn't, you know, and then I wasn't sure, is it my job to investigate further to make sure 100, you know, and I remember I had a conversation with Marcy Phillips at ABC, not specifically about him, but about accuracy when people are being cast. And I remember this was now some years ago that she said, if it's a guest star or recur, you can get away with it not being exact. But if it's a series regular, there'll be further investigation and you can get in a lot of trouble if they're not what they're supposed to be. And I think about that. But now I feel like it's evolved and I feel like we're supposed to make sure it's correct regardless of the size of the role. And I guess I propose that as a question. I mean, when is it appropriate to push someone, this is just hypothetically, who is Chinese, you know, for an ethnicity that they, for whatever reason, seemingly resemble, but they aren't. And I don't know that I know the clear answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
that's
somewhat
the $1,000,000 question that these kinds of conversations seek to open up. I'm going to add another point of view to it before we answer that. I know Ed Cook has had his hand up for quite a while. And in a minute, I'm going to jump away because the network just moved up my Zoom. I apologize. But Ed, are you open yet? So if I disappear, it's not hating you.
Yeah, I'm open.
It's loving you.
we got you, Stuart. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Edward, go ahead, boss.
This is not Ed Cook. This is Justin Lord, Alicia. I know you're looking, right? First of all, I want to say thank you for doing this. And it's such a great joy to see all this multi complexions on the screen of about 104 people. That's beautiful. I'm usually cast as Black. I'm a Black father, and I have a son that is mixed because my first wife was a white woman, and he identifies as Black, but he works behind the scenes at a company that he owns, and it's called the Foundation. It's a post-production house. And he was just telling me the other day that just him setting up his website, he had done a lot of Black shows. He started with Scandal. He put Scandal on the air, Blackish now, and a lot of dance TV shows. And because in setting up his website, he had a lot of Black shows first and then the white shows. And he was advised that maybe he should change that up. And this is very recent. Okay, he should change that up and make it every other one, which is what he did. And he was really kind of disturbed about that, you know. I've been working a little bit more on the other side as a theater director. And when people come in to cast, for me to cast, I don't see I'm looking for a certain rhythm, a certain sound. And I know the sound that I can get from Black people that they bring, or the sound that Asian people bring, the sound that Italian people bring, you know, the look of it. And for so many years, when I was in New York, I was in New York as an actor, as I am out here as well. I still do that. To just see one color there was very monotonous. It was tiresome. I wondered why we couldn't break that, you know. But I come from when, what's his name, Jack Wormser was with the agency. And at that time, the agency was majority Caucasian. It has changed over the years, and I appreciate that change. But I think now that we have to accept what we see. This is what life is. I'm looking at it right here on my screen of 104 people, which I think is beautiful. And I don't know how to get past it, but if you ever come before me, I don't really see it. I'm just looking for, you can be Asian and you have that rhythm. If I'm looking for Asian, if I'm looking for Black, I think each ethnicity brings its own rhythms and we can't ignore that. And nor do I say, should you ignore it? Should you try to be someone else? There was a time when I was coming up and they asked for the types like this. We need an Eddie Murphy type. We need a Jimmy Walker type. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the type thing has changed as far as casting goes. Can I be Jimmy Walker? Can I be Eddie Murphy? You know what I'm saying, brother?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate your comments, Justin. And we went on the same auditions back in the day when I was an actor, and I've admired your work for years. So thank you for the role you've played. And yes, we continue to evolve the narrative. I'm going to call on Robert and then I'm going to pop out. I'll try to come back. I apologize. You know how this world is going. And I thank you all for having this conversation. Robert, is your mic open? It probably takes a minute on this long list to find you. So that's why that happens. Very astute comments though, Justin. Thank you. Testing for Robert. All right.
Okay, it should be going right now.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Here we are.
All right, great. If you have trouble hearing me, I'll turn my video off. It's internet connection is a little weird. Thank you, obviously, for doing this. Like everybody said, it feels cliche, but yes, this is beautiful. This means a lot. It really does. But I know we're kind of pressed for time, so I'm gonna just drive through a little bit with my question. And I'm not really sure what I'm asking, but I'm gonna try and be as clear as possible. So Erica, you mentioned that in the breakdowns, when you put ethnicity, or when you don't put ethnicity in there, what you get is usually mostly white submissions, which I understand. So it seems to me, and I'm going to focus, I guess, on commercial castings, because I personally seen a lot of change, not enough change, but a lot of change in legit castings, but commercials seem to be a little more rigid in their representation. And it seems to me that the issue kind of goes back to copywriters or, and legit script writers. So I'm kind of curious, how do we, if that you agree with that, I guess, the analysis, and also how do we make that known to the commercial world, to the copywriters, specifically asking, because like I'm Black and white. When, I've gone on into auditions and it's only for the Black character, and it's like the white character for, I have a comedy background. So the white character happened to be more comedic and the Black character is a little more dry. And I'm like, look, I'm both. I fit this one a lot better. And the casting agent was very sweet and very understanding, but was just like, no, they want to see a white guy for this role. And it didn't matter, and I've also been on the other side of it where I've written a lot of copy for commercials. So, and I know, a lot of times it doesn't matter. How do we get that representation to show up in the scripting phase, in the copy phase? Is there anything we can do, or, just curious.
It's a hard question, and I'm going to jump in from the commercial standpoint, having been a commercial agent as long as I was, and I think that we do find it changing a little bit. I've heard tell recently of storyboards that actually have Black characters on them, where it never used to be that way when you see the storyboard on the set. Stuart actually, I'm sorry, he just left because he tells a frightening story. Stuart was in commercial casting for a very long time with Sheila Manning here in Los Angeles, who was one of the top casting directors. And he tells a story of being in the room where the best choice for each of the two roles were Black actors. But the ad agency went, oh, we can't do that because it'll look like a Black commercial. We don't want it to look like a Black commercial.
Only McDonald's commercial can do that.
Right. Well, again, we have the commercial part of our business is the most bigoted part of the business. It's about selling product. It's about, we can't have a Black family use our toothpaste in the South because we'll lose families. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. And we have Black ad agencies. We have Latin ad agencies. Why? Because they're trying to sell to particular audiences. But I do think, and Jamie, maybe you can speak to this. Jamie Hernandez runs our commercial department, the Dell commercial department in LA. That we are seeing, I think, much more of a change commercially than we have in the past, with a little bit more openness in the casting. Jamie?
Yes, I would 100% agree with that. I think that we are seeing some changes. I think the agents commercially, just like the agents theatrically, are trying to get the opportunities for the actors. Even if the role is asking for Caucasian, if they're not trying to put together a family of all Caucasian, if they need the kids to match the parents, I think we're thinking outside the box, and I think they're looking for the best actor for the role. But like Mark said, it does come down to the ad agency and the client ultimately who are going to make those decisions on who are in the final spot. But we're always trying to get you as many opportunities as possible.
Of course.
And as far as, playwrights, I mean, Erica, I guess you could kind of speak to that as to what the teams are making, what kind of decisions the teams are making.
Right. Yeah. As I said before, I think, that now I sort of feel, I think that, what we're attempting in our conversations is to broaden who we talk to and who's involved. So right now we're really focused on the casting community, but I know that our efforts are to broaden and invite agents and managers to talk with us. And then next is to, invite producers and directors to talk with us and talk about how we cast and expanding our thinking about how we see actors and who we see. I think, again, it is up to the clients, the people who are hiring us, but there has to be some way, as we're all saying, there has to be some way that we break through that dynamic a little bit more. Like, obviously the buck has to stop with somebody. Somebody has to make a decision at the end of the day, right, on who we hire. But again, why can't it be someone who we don't identify necessarily as a specific race? And we need to have these conversations, not just amongst us, but they have to be broader. This is a great place to start. Like I said, I'm really excited about the conversations we're having in our community. And I'm excited about the fact that you've hosted this. But right, it needs to, like, those commercial people, they need to be brought into the conversation, right? Everybody does. And in order for things to really, really change, right? Like, right. We've got to get more people on board, the people who are the decision makers, because I'm finding myself even having this conversation. I'm just going to be honest. I'm kind of like, I'm finding myself a little tired by saying that I don't have the power to like the director and the writer and the producer, they're the ones who make the decision. They do. But even hearing myself say that makes me feel kind of crappy, quite frankly.
And that's a position that we're all in this kind of middle area of, we don't make the decisions. We're the cog in the machine trying to feed the machine, and we're trying to feed it what we think it's most healthy for it to have. but they keep spitting it back out at us sometimes. But
Mark, can I make a quick remark about the commercial side of things? You have to know the advertising agency is having a real come to Jesus moment about race. And there have been firings, there have been mergers, there is a huge shift going on. My hope is that it is not just a earthquake, but a true reckoning, and it's going to change it. I think Jamie can say as well, I'm working on our youth department right now. I have never seen so many calls for multiracial families, mixed race families in the commercial space. They want that first and foremost, and they'll make families if they have to, but please send me multiracial families. That was not happening 6 months ago.
Right.
So there has been a shift at the decision makers table, and I have to say, very pleased about that.
That's great.
I've noticed that. I was actually going to mention, like, just watching TV, I've noticed like the number of mixed race families in commercials. I'm like, where was this when I was a kid?
Right. Yeah.
It does not exist. And it's really exciting. Yeah.
Up until a couple of years ago, it was super rare, still super rare. I mean, I remember the Cheerios commercial or IKEA commercial. I mean, that I can name them is a sad commentary.
Yeah.
Jesse, you want to jump in?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jessie. I'm in New York. I'm an actor. I always tell people I'm mixed. My mom's white, my dad's black. That's how I identify. This is exciting. I will keep it short. I never feel like I know where I belong. And just now I've been having this whole new reckoning of embracing myself as a black woman. But I know when I walk into the room, for the most part, people see me as black. And I'm just wondering what you feel, Erica, about, I've just felt so bad because for the most part, I haven't been able to fulfill this idea of what a lot of stories, what black stories are being told. I love that those stories are being told, but when it comes to me and working, I'll walk in and it's just always on my mind. So it's a personal thing that I'm working through, but it's always on my mind. If like, am I being considered for my talent or the amount of blackness that this writer thinks I am? And so, for the most part, the writers have been white in the first place, so that's the problem too. But do you know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering, and we're talking about commercials and things like that we're seeing more of a place. But are we seeing more of a place? I guess, and you don't know me, but are we seeing a place for all different kinds of black women? You know what I mean?
I do.
Mixed people, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think you're raising a really interesting point. Like, what is black?
Right.
What is that? And we'll just be specific since that's what you brought up. And what has your experience been when you go in for black writers or black directors, or do you? Like what?
Right, like haven't had that experience.
Okay.
And hopefully that obviously will change, and I'm excited to see what that will bring out of me. But I think it is a little I'm a little triggered by it because I'm like, will I be black enough for that black writer? Because I've only had experiences, right? I for the most part do musical theater. So it's like they see me as Dolores in Sister Act. I always use that example, but I'm not her,
Yeah.
And that's fine. But for so long I felt bad because I'm not her, and that's what everyone wants to see. I do feel like we're transitioning, but yeah, when it comes to the TV world, when I see Susan Kalichi Watson, I'm like, oh, that's who I am. That's the black woman that I am, but that's, I'm 32 and seeing that for the first time,
Yeah, I think that you're maybe I wonder then if there's more I'm just brainstorming here, like maybe there's more TV in your future. Maybe that's I mean, there's more TV in all of our futures because we don't have theater right now.
But do you think that idea of black women, it's broadening, and women in general, I should say?
Do I think it's broadening? Yeah, and I think the reason it's broadening is because of what you said. I think we're telling more stories told from writers who are black and black women, and so we're getting like a fuller scope maybe of like what the black experience is. and that's, I mean, that's just my perception. I'm working on, well, you know, kind of working on a production of For Colored Girls that's going to Broadway eventually. And I think that that cast will, you know, will be made up of all kinds of Black women, you know, and oh, I am very actively working on a play called Thoughts of a Colored Man, also for Broadway. And that experience has been really interesting because we are, you know, the writer, it's really important to the writer and the director that we have whatever it means to have a full representation of what Black is. I mean, however you can do that in a hour and a half play.
Right.
And 2-hour play, and what that cast looks like. So there have been a lot of discussions around what that looks like. So including talking about an actor in particular who is a mixed race actor, a few of them, in fact. So so again, I'm feeling a little bit more heartened by what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing with the teams that I work with.
Yeah, I think until we really start getting the full wave back, we're not going to know how this conversation has changed the art that is created, but it will change the art that is created it by its very nature. It's what these kind of catastrophic events do, is changes art. And hopefully it'll change for the positive. Natalie, did you want to jump in?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, how you doing, everyone? I'm Nathalise, and I wanted to add a layer of complexity, let's say, to the conversation we were having with Kumiko, with Sarah, and with Jed about doing the right thing. Can a mixed race actor play Latino? Can an appearing brown person play an array of characters that might not be their ethnic background? And this is something that I come against all the time. I'm Latina, I'm Dominican, but I would have loved to play someone from Hawaiian descent. You know, like as an artist, you want the ability to play a lot of things, right? And I can't help but think, do white people have this issue? If someone is being cast, if we're looking for someone who's Irish or French or Spanish or Portuguese, are we looking for only actors who have that specific background? Like, and it's complex, and I know it's a sensitive issue, and I'm conflicted within myself, right? Because I'm Dominican, but I can play Puerto Rican, I could play Cuban. But for example, I have a very specific thing about feeling that I don't feel I'm appropriate to play Afro-Latina, because I think that's a very specific experience that is not mine. But that doesn't mean, you know, so it is complex, but I think that us as a community have to come to a decision or some kind of consensus about it. And I fear so much super specificity in casting, because I feel what you're doing is limiting yourself to seeing actors who can provide different experiences of story. Because even as a writer, as people were writing, and I have this idea of like, oh, well, I'm writing from my experience. I think that this girl, she grew up in Puerto Rico, but she's lived in New York, but maybe this actor comes in and blows my mind with a performance. I'm like, yes, that's the character. I didn't know it, but thank you for giving me this opportunity. And that's kind of what we do, right? We're all a team, the producer, the casting director, the actor, we come together. And I fear that us hyper labeling ourselves and our characters is dividing us more than it's uniting us. And I don't know where the middle point is. I don't know how we're going to figure it out, but I just want to make sure we know that white people don't have this issue. Like, if you're white, you can play French. I'm not auditioning for no people from like with French descent. Yeah. And I speak perfect French, you know? So I do want to make sure that that is also a part of this conversation and an issue of historical privilege and all of that, but it is a thing.
And I know, I'm sure that you've had these conversations in your office as well, Erica. We've certainly had them in ours, because your art, you know, we represent artists, we don't represent widgets.
Right.
And so I feel, and this was a conversation I was just having in talking to some of the staff, is I need to bring you every opportunity that seems appropriate for you. You're going to make that decision whether you want to tell that story or you feel that story is best told by somebody else.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be
that boils
like, nope,
down
that's
to a
not me.
decision that you have to make. And it's certainly a conversation that I might have with Erica. Hey, Erica, I know this is what you're looking for, but Natalie's can really play this. And then she has to think about, well, will my team accept that? Is that what the producers are looking for based on her conversations? Because I haven't had those conversations. But I've had a conversation with you as an artist who says, this is what I want to play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have actors say, I'm willing to play a gay character, but I don't want to take a continuing role where I'm going to be telling that journey of that gay character, because that's not me and that's not my story to tell. So it's a very complex issue, like you say, but I know from our perspective, we want to bring you the most opportunities and then allow you to make that choice if it's a story you can tell. And Erica, you can chime in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I echo exactly what you're saying. I think that it's, again, I think it's what the honoring, again, just honoring like what the specificities of like what the team is writing. I mean, I'm not, you know, I think that it's the same, you know, I'm operating from the same place of wanting to bring in the best. At the end of the day, I want to bring in the best actors for my team. I want to show them the best people and honor whatever whatever story they're telling. I'm going to go back and use an example of when I was casting The Great Leap. The writer, it was the director who wanted to see specifically Chinese actors. The writer was open, you know, to said all Asian, you know, and that was where the writer and the director had conflicts. So and since the director, you know, she sort of won that discussion because she was directing the play, but the writer was open to, you know, to all Asian, any Asian people. She wanted the best actors again. The writer did. I think that you're, but I do think I want to emphasize your point though, about, you're absolutely right. You know, white people don't have to like identify by like where they're from. You know, I think that that's a very, very good point. And I think that it's absolutely worth investigating. You know, we need to have that conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that I feel like every time we talk about minorities, it's just minorities. But the idea here is that we become one population, right? So of course you're going to give me an example of an Asian Chinese situation, right? Of course. But I want, and especially because we're having this conversation, but then you're having conversations with other casting directors, right? And then maybe with directors and other people on different levels, right? That we're always keeping this idea that we want to get to a place of equality, right? And if we're going to be super specific with us, okay, then let's be super specific with the white people too. Like I have no issue with that. But if you're writing in a person who's half Irish and half Greek, I want to make sure you know what I mean? I want to make sure that we're able to hold people accountable to what they're saying they're going to do for everybody, because this is how we're dealing with the race situation, and minorities, this is how we're going to deal with them. We're going to make sure we say who we want when we want. That's not necessarily what we're asking for, right? What we're asking is to be included, to not be separated necessarily because of how we look, which is not colorblindness. So I know that it's sophisticated. It's a sophisticated situation, but I do want to make sure that it's something that is on the table, that we are treating this as like, it's this little group of people who have this issue, and it's a big group of people.
Right, and that's why we open a lot of these town halls to everybody. We want our white clients in the conversation as well, because we all need to be in the conversation. Mr. Matos, you want to join in?
Hello. Hey. Yeah, I just want to thank you guys, just like everyone has been doing, because like oftentimes I feel like during these conversations, someone who's like mixed and wants to not take up space, you know, with colorism and like proximity to whiteness, you want to like give some leeway and not like step on any toes. But we've been talking a lot about like the specificity and with mixed race folks. Like for myself, I'm Latin, I'm Brazilian, I'm Puerto Rican, and a quarter Italian. And so for me, and I also recognize, you know, phenotype and genotype don't line up. So I look on the lighter end of the spectrum. So like when we're talking about these, like the specificity of these roles, oftentimes, like we've been saying, it can be a bit of a hindrance in feeling like, oh, should I take this role because I don't want to like represent someone that I'm not. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable taking a Dominican role, or unless it's like specific to the story. That's been kind of my personal dividing line, unless like race has been like, oh, this person is like, for example, like Dominican and absolutely is central. So like, that's not my story to tell. But I guess my question is there a possible future where perhaps like through the like synchronistic process of casting, writing, directing, there could be like room for slight changes in characters' backgrounds, depending on who's cast, like leaving like kind of like an open space, like, oh, well, like, because I know sometimes we say like no ethnicity, but oftentimes just like it gets slotted as like, oh, that's, well, just white or whatever. But is there a possibility where that can actually translate in like a kind of industry-wide sense that, oh, these kind of roles were like actually open for everyone, and we're open to having a discussion with bringing out and highlighting specific artists' backgrounds and personalities and the intersections of all of that? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that happens. I think that happens a lot. You know, I think that's something that we do a lot. You know, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I think
Okay.
it happens in TV
Hi,
too.
Alex.
Hey.
They'll
It's
cast
nice to
somebody
meet you.
in something for
Me
TV
too.
film and then realize,
Yeah,
oh, this
yeah.
person's got this background, so they'll write that background into the story. So
Okay.
we definitely do see that happening. And
Yeah.
and it usually does get paid because, oh, we've now cast a bunch of white people, now we have to differentiate who they are. So we'll make this one Italian, and this one, you know,
Okay.
in the story. Jen.
Thanks.
Everyone, I'm Jen. Same. Thank you so much for having this conversation. You feel left out of the conversation sometimes, or you don't know how to take up space, as you know, Alexander said. My comment was kind of to Mark and to Jed, and like, I appreciate you guys saying that you don't have the specific answers either, because I didn't honestly realize until recently that I've always carried around the confusion and the angst about, am I passing? Am I doing the right thing? How do I read? What do I do? And while it's helpful to know that while the responsibility falls to me and that's my choice, having the conversation exist outside of my head and knowing that we can speak to you and then you can speak to casting is such a huge step forward in trying to sort through and trying to make that decision and not feeling like it just lives in isolation in something that I've been dealing with in my entire career. And my next thing is, it's more of a comment or if it's open, but part of the thing I feel as well is that mixed race people have been left out of the narrative for so long that historically we have no place. So not only are we waiting for the right role that's the right combination of the right races and the right ethnic background, it also feels like there's an entire segment of time that we are not allowed to be a part of. Because historically, an Asian person wouldn't be mixed. And, you know, like I said, I don't know what the question is in that, but it's just so difficult because it just puts another layer and takes up so much work off the table that we don't get to be part of. I feel super lucky that I found one of the few pieces in Hamilton that really, you know, took a leap there and get to be a part, like being able to represent someone in history is so powerful to me. But yeah, I think that's really difficult, just feeling like we have never had a place in any narrative. And how do we create more space for us when we can't be involved in half of the stories that are out there?
Yeah, and that's what moved me to do this particular town hall about the mixed race, is hearing in all the previous town halls that pain that you just expressed, Jen, and hearing that over and over and hearing it from my friends who are mixed race, and that's what I wanted to give a voice so that we could at least get it out. Let's put it out there. You know, one of the mandates I certainly have for my lit department is put people in writers' rooms of color, with disability, with mental illness, whatever it is, because that's how the stories get told.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Gail's still on, but I will always steal this. This is a Peter Fairley line who said, you know, it's never in a script where it says the boss walks into the room, he's not black. I paraphrased that from him. He said, the boss walks into the room, he's not in a wheelchair. You know, but you know, it doesn't say that in the script. So why can't it be, you know, even if it says Asian, that doesn't mean you're 100% Asian. Both parents are 100% X.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because as we know, when you have some blood that is non-white, you identify with that other side for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I guess there's some people that may not, but in the conversations I have, most people with some form of you know, multiracial background don't identify as white.
It's because that's how the world.
Because the world identifies that way, right?
To the difference.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you find, Mark, that you have more, I don't know, I sort of find that directors and writers when I'm casting theater tend to get more, they seem really more specific. Like they seem to be the ones who are really focused on specificity. I don't find it as much in TV, but that could just be me. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, Harold, do you want to speak to that? Harold runs our LA theatrical department. He doesn't have a red screen, so forgive him. I muted you again, Harold, sorry.
I feel television is opening up. You know, I think that there's opportunities everywhere. But I wanted to talk to something a little bit earlier. You know, I look at my job as sort of putting a square peg in a round hole. And so when you see a breakdown, I'm interested in the answers are how you feel about playing something that maybe you're not, or you're one thing and you're not another thing. Because you know, it's like if a casting director asks me, hey, does your client ride a horse? I say, yes, every time. I know that guy's going to go and train and ride a horse. And by next week, he or she's going to be able to ride a horse and play that role. Mm-hmm. So I hear that, you know, a lot of times you don't want to tell the stories of other people. But I think our job, as Mark reiterated a little earlier, is to get you the opportunities and ultimately let you make those decisions, because I'm looking to get you the audition. I'm looking to get you in the room to help tell the story. Mm-hmm. But you would have to communicate it to us that maybe it's not your story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And many people do. Many people have turned things down and say, I don't feel like that's my story. Yeah, Tristan, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I was just listening in and just going back and forth to what everybody was like saying. And me, as a person of color, I am, you know, part Native American, and I also am very androgynous. So like when I see stuff like, you know, there's shows like Pose, and there's shows like, you know, Ryan Murphy Productions, like Hollywood and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, can I go and audition for those parts? Because I know a lot of the Pose stuff is like, you know, with the trans community, and I don't want to be not PC. But at the same time, I don't want to be like, you know what I mean? I can look either way. So, you know, depending on my hairstyle or depending on my makeup, you know, I can play very masculine if I want to. I can play, you know, feminine if I want to. I can play, if it called for, you know, me playing trans, I could probably play trans, but at the same time, I don't want to disrespect, you know, those actors. So I think what Harold was saying, I kind of like, you know, got what I needed from that. So that was my whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think it's boiling down to those individual decisions you want to make. You know, in the conversation with your representation, and that's why we started these forums to begin with. We're going to represent you. We need to know what your voice is, and again, those are all individual discussions, and that's why we've broken down with some of our smaller groups as well, Tristan. So thank you for jumping in there. Is it Blau? I'm sorry.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Blue.
Blue. Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
No, you're fine. You were close, so it's okay. I did arrive a little late. I had a prior meeting right before this, so if this was already asked or if this was kind of brought up, I'm sorry, and I'm just trying to catch up here. But I just want to say first, I really appreciate you guys doing this and like taking time out of your day to come this, because I do think that this is an issue that needs to be brought up and it needs to be discussed and talked about. So I guess my question is that we have acknowledged that there are some issues and problems in this work, but this is especially nowadays with the time and everything, this is a time of calling for change, or working with things for changing it. So like, where do we go from here? I know you guys have said, well, like I heard like one person say, well, you know, it's just kind of how it works, but where do we go from here? Like, how do we work with this? Where would we be going from here?
And I think that we can only do it by having these conversations and then taking these conversations out of the room and into the streets. And I think Jed jumped off, but right after our first town hall, Jed got a breakdown looking for a hood in something. And he picked up the phone and called casting and he said, hey, you know, we just had this town hall with a bunch of clients. And that is an offensive word. It's a triggering word. You don't need to use that word. And it was a whole conversation, happened to be a black casting director, happened to be a black writer that had chosen that word. And she said, well, I didn't mean to offend anybody. And Jed said, well, I don't think anybody writes a breakdown intending to offend anybody. So no. I don't think you were going to offend anybody, but letting you know that this is the perception, and they changed their breakdown. And so that's what we can do from our perspective in trying to move the needle somewhat.
Yeah.
You know, this is a very important conversation that we're all having. And I just wanted to share, and Jed pointed out to me before, of our staff, which is 25% people of color, of that, the preponderance of them are mixed race. And so we just, and don't necessarily appear as though, you know, Jamie carries the Hernandez last name, which will make say, oh, she must have some kind of Hispanic background. But most of our staff doesn't have a particularly ethnic last name and struggle with some of these same things that you guys are going through. So that's why another reason why we wanted to have this conversation and felt it was important that the staff be on here as well to kind of hear what was being said. Rand, you wanted to jump in here, did you not?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm very curious on the conversation, and you kind of covered it, but in regards to the conversation with the client and what Alicia said, I have seen in commercials the mixed race families, which I'm excited about. I look forward to seeing more of those. But in regards to legit, I'm curious to see what kind of conversations are happening between casting and the client. In specifics, if you can share any of those conversations with us.
Sure, Jabari, do you want to jump in there, or Ashley, Barrett, anybody? We can't see you, so.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in at all. Yeah, I think you you did actually answer this question a bit ago, Mark, when you stated that obviously the conversation continues, and we, with the whole situation with Jed, with the changing of language. So, if we don't know that it's a problem, then we can't, remedy the situation. So until, we're told that, hey, this offends me or this bothers me, we can't make the proper adjustments. So I do think that it's already in motion. Like it's been said several times already today, the conversation has to continue. So until you guys keep giving us this information, then we can obviously use that as your representatives to bring it back to casting, the producers. And I will say the conversations that are being had are one of people realizing that, you know, certain past behaviors are not okay. So, you know, it seems to be a sense of acknowledgement there. And I do think there's a lot of work to be done, but, you know, gotta at least somewhat give credit where credit is due.
Right, thanks. Ariana? Is Ariana still here?
I'm looking right now.
Okay.
I don't see Ariana. Am I just?
Okay, she may have jumped off. Is Avery still with us?
Just asked her to unmute. Oh, there we go.
Hi, she actually, stepped to a class.
Okay.
But we were wondering if you, I don't know why my video won't start.
Sure.
We were wondering if you guys saw a difference between casting for younger people in terms of race, like she's 10 versus older, more adult actors. Because I know just with her group, I feel like the younger kids, and it could be our bubble, but I feel like there's a lot more mixed kids and tolerance, and they're a lot more open-minded to all kinds of diversity.
With younger kids?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. I personally haven't had to cast any younger kids lately. So do you mind just expanding a little bit on what you
Yeah, I think like just in terms of like commercials, especially I feel like there's more younger mixed kids than there are for adult projects. So I was wondering if that is just stuff I'm noticing because I have a kid in that demographic, or if it's something that's factual across the board. And also just in terms of COVID, there's a lot of family auditions, but I don't act. And I was wondering if there's a way to maybe package people. And I'm not even sure if that's like logistically possible, but just seeing all the mixed clients you have, if that would be like a feasible option.
Yeah, sometimes they ask us to create families. I mean, with COVID, it's been a little harder since they want pods and they want people together. You know, as far as whether there's more room for mixed children, I don't have that answer. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't cast commercials at all.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
Well, Avery's my client, so I think what I feel like in the commercial world, which is very distinct, is that you have groups of people, and you have the advertiser who wants to say, what is the most interesting looking group? And very often it will be about your hair. And very often a mixed race child will have amazing hair.
Yeah.
And they will cast that person because of their hair, their eye color. They want an eye color that is unusual in a certain type of skin color. It's really an aesthetic. And that's something that's been going on for a while, kind of unconscious.
No, since the beginning of time. Since the beginning of time. Hair commercials has always been about a haircut. Yeah. White, black, Asian, Hispanic, it's about a haircut. It was the bob, it was the this, it was, you know, it's always been about a haircut.
Right, and I also think that there is an attempt there's a rainbow coalition feeling about who does not want to see, from the Coke commercial in the 70s, who doesn't want to see every type of child from all over the world coming together to all have a Coke, to all eat a burger, to all, whatever it is. So I think that's always been part of that. And because, I mean, we're in a racist world, it's easier to take with kids. When everybody grows up and they have agenda and they're adults, maybe we don't want to see so many races working together, but kids, it feels safer. So this is just kind of, I think, how the decision makers have been thinking. Hopefully we're getting beyond that and we can really address it. But as I was saying, when you're seeing more mixed race families, because now we're realizing that exists and we want to acknowledge that, you're going to see more opportunity for the mixed race kid. to get back to your original question.
Great, awesome. Asim.
Am I off mute? Hey, just had a quick follow-up. We had the wonderful town hall, I think a couple months ago or so. I don't understand time anymore. But Mark, you had mentioned that you guys were going to have a conversation with the ad agencies where the power lies. So I was wondering, did you guys have that conversation? What's the takeaway? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, we're actually coordinating it. They're coordinating it on a bigger level through the ATA and through the CCDA. So we haven't had an individual conversation except in our everyday goings on. But Alicia is on the board at the ATA, part of the commercial committee. They're focusing on trying to do it on a bigger, as I'm sure SAG and AFTRA is trying to do as well, on a bigger level. So that's the short version of the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we also want to bring those same attitude people to the table here so that actors can talk to them directly. And so that's in the works as well.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Great. I think that pretty much covered everybody. Guys, I want to thank everybody for jumping on here. I want to thank Stuart and Erica for their time and Sam for putting this all together. Justin and Mara, who have done, I think, almost all of these town halls for us from the interpreter perspective. It's really important for us to keep these conversations going and to continue to see your faces and hear your stories and what is going on out there. So please, our emails, our phones are always open to you. And we look forward to some kind of return to normal, whatever that may be. And go out and vote, regardless of who you're voting for, go vote. I'm not lying. Okay.
Yeah, go vote.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Erica.